This conference will now be recorded.
Okay. Um, Good morning once again, and thank you everyone for joining. Um, so yesterday we were done with the first kind of demo session. So in yesterday's session we discussed about few important points like what is performance testing, uh, LoadRunner architecture. Okay, and we also recorded a simple script and then we replayed it, and then we we have gone through the results, like how the results come up. We have also discussed about the course content yesterday, and we had a short Q&A session as well. Okay, so in today's session, one second. Okay, so in today's session, we are going to discuss about types of performance testing. Okay, so yesterday, in general, not a textbook kind of definition, but I told you a generic definition, like it's all about checking the performance of an application, because we are dealing with software, right? So checking the performance of an application by applying load. Okay, so what is load? That is with respect to number of users, that also we covered. Now in today's session we'll be discussing about different types of performance testing. Okay, which is again very important, and which is a kind of day-to-day work activity in our projects. So I do have slides to explain all of these, but then for time being, I prefer to use this notepad. uh, okay, because probably I can share the slides later on, but discussing the topics here is pretty much helpful than rather than going through the slides. Okay, just for today. Now, first I'll make a list of all the different types of performance testing. So first one is a load test. Okay, first one is load test. Second, stress test. Third, endurance or soak or duration test. I mean, we call it with any of these names. Okay, endurance or soak or duration test. Fourth one is scalability test. Okay, then we have volume test. Then we have failover test. Okay, then you can also like discuss like about spike testing. Okay, and we have something called smoke testing, which we'll discuss later. Okay, later in sense, like I'll tell you why we need to do smoke testing. So these are the important types of performance testing, and it doesn't mean that in every project we perform all of these. Not required. Only, I mean, two or three from this list will be executed or considered for every project. It's not possible to run all types of tests in single project in a single release. Okay, definitely not possible. So they, I mean, it depends on client or the management to decide what type of test is more relevant to their project. They choose that particular type of test and continue within the project. So I'll tell you in some time, like if the client is not aware of performance testing at all, and if the client ask us to choose any of these, okay, from this list, which is best suited for their application, so we can suggest some. I'll tell you which ones are those, but then let's begin with load testing first. Okay, so load testing, before I explain load testing, I would like to add one more point with respect to performance testing. So in general, performance testing is measured in terms of in terms of speed, stability, and scalability. Okay, so you can just remember this important point. Performance testing is measured in terms of speed, stability, and scalability. So now in these different types of testing, we have something related to speed and something related to stability and something related to scalability as well. Okay, now let's discuss about load test first. So load test here is the first major type of test that we execute in every project. Okay, so even if you work in any company, any project, doesn't matter. The first important major type of performance test that we run is load test. Okay, so what is this all about? It is all about checking the speed of the application, okay, by applying some expected load. Okay, so checking the speed of the application by applying some expected load. So here, if you see the term speed, I have used it here. Okay, so what do you mean by speed? Speed in sense how fast the page is loading. So you click a link, guys. Okay, generally you click a link on the browser. How fast the page is loading. Okay, you click a button, then how fast it is navigating from one page to another page. Generally, any web page, we generally have links and buttons, right? So I'm just taking an example of that. So if you click a link or a button, how fast the next page is loading or how fast it is navigating from one page to another page. Okay, it is nothing but the speed, the amount of time it is taking to load the page. Okay, after performing some action like click of a link or click of a button, how much time it is taking to load the page is nothing but the speed. Okay, now what do you mean by load or expected load? I told you yesterday also, a load is in here in terms of number of users. See, you can, if you test any application with a single user, that doesn't become a performance testing, right? We don't call it as a performance testing because we cannot uh, calculate the performance of an application by just testing with single user. Okay, when multiple users are accessing the application, okay, and let's say like 100, 500, 1000, and then how the application is performing is what we want to know. Okay, that's the reason without this statement, the load test is invalid. It becomes a kind of invalid one. Okay, I mean, normally if you want to test with one user, why would we need a load testing tool? First of all, we don't need a load testing tool like LoadRunner, which can simulate virtual users, right? You can normally test manually also with one user, or you can use Selenium also with one user. Okay, so that is different, and this is performance testing is different. Here, it's all about the load, the users, the number of users that you are going to test. Hmm? Okay, now, uh, okay, obviously this is a first major type of test. Okay, and if this is successful, then only we generally move to some other test like stress or endurance or scalability or volume or something like that. Okay, so this has to be a successful test for you. Okay, on what basis we are calling it as a successful test or a failure test, I'll tell you in some time. uh, then this load test will run for 1 hour steady state. Okay, now what is steady state, I'll tell you later, but for time being just understand that a load test will run for 1 hour. Okay, let's say you start a load test at 9 a.m. and then you stop at 10 a.m. Probably, generally we run a load test for 1 hour minimum. Okay, so 1 hour is the steady state for load test. What is that you are verifying? We verify basically response times because it is all about speed, right? So we verify response times. Response times means how much time it has taken. See, uh, like this is the client from where you are sending a request. This is a server. Okay, now you send a request to server and the server will then send a response back. Okay, I'll tell you what is server and all those things in tomorrow's session. Just for time being, just understand that we send a request and then we get a response. Okay, how much time it is taking to send a request and then to get the response back, the overall time taken, we call it as response time. Okay, so that's the amount of time taken to load the page. So response time is a very important term that we frequently use in our upcoming sessions, and basically we frequently use in our day-to-day work related projects. So we verify response times. Okay. Mm, yesterday I told you, right? uh, is is there any specific uh, time that is considered as a that as an industry standard, like the page should load in 2 seconds or 3 seconds or 4 seconds or 5 seconds, like that? Yes, the industry standard is 2 seconds. Okay. uh, and that means when you click a link or when you click a button, the page should load within 2 seconds. Of course, there is an exception. Depending on the project architecture and the complexity, the client might be okay with the page loading in 3 seconds or 5 seconds as well. Okay. Now, how do we know what is the how do we know that what is the acceptable response time or acceptable number? So client will give you. Okay, let's say that is called SLA, service level agreement. Okay, so client will say that, okay, if client says SLA is 3 seconds. Okay, if client says SLA is 3 seconds, it means that every action that you perform on that application, like let's say click, login, launch, okay, whatever it is, whatever the action you perform, the response time should be less than 3 seconds. Okay, if SLA is 3 seconds, it should be the response time, whatever you are getting, it should be less than the SLA. If anything is exceeding the SLA, then it could be considered as a performance issue. Okay. Now let's say client has given SLA of 3 seconds. Now you tested with some 100 users. Okay. You tested with some 100 users. And then you could see that launch itself is taking like 7 seconds or 8 seconds. Obviously, that is exceeding the SLA, right? Which is given by client. Then definitely it is a kind of performance issue. Okay. Now, uh, till now I have been saying that, okay, let's say we'll test with 100 users, or let's say we'll test with 500 users, like that. But then who is going to give you the number of users? Okay, let's say I'll take 500 here, let's say. But who is going to give you this number for your testing? Obviously, client will give you. Okay, client will say that, hey, this is my application. Can you test this application with 500 users and tell me how it is performing? Okay, like that we will get some input from client. Okay, we will get so much of information from client and the application team, which we will discuss in day after tomorrow session. I'll tell you what are the different things that we need to focus before you start working on any project. Okay, so this information is given by client. How client is getting this value, it is a different thing. Okay, I'll explain you in day after tomorrow session. Okay, so as of now, what did we learn? So load test is all about checking the speed of the application by applying some expected load. Okay, like testing the application with some number of users. Okay, so who is going to give you that users? Obviously, client is going to give you this number. This is the first major type of test that we perform in any project, and it will run for 1 hour. What is that important thing that we verify? We verify the application performance, that is the response times, and the response time should be less than the SLA given by the client. Okay, so any questions? Okay, now I told you that this is a first major type of test, and then if this test is a failure, then basically there is no point in running other types of tests. Okay, Now, how do you determine that this is a pass or fail, or a successful test or a failed test? See, I'll tell you, for time being, I'll just tell you some couple of points which you can consider it to mark it as a pass or fail. Okay. When you run the test, okay, and you get the errors, or when you get a failed transactions, like, okay, are more than 2% or 3%. Basically, it depends from project to project again. In some projects, they consider 2%, and in some projects, they consider 3%, like that. Let's say for us, it is 2%. When failed transactions are more than 2%, then it is a failed test overall. See, you should have more than 98% of passed transactions. Okay, I mean, at least in my personal opinion, in some projects they accept 97% of past transactions overall. Okay, so you can call it as a failed test when when the number of failed transactions are more than 2 or 3%. Okay, and or you can say or when response times are very high. See, your SLA is just 3 seconds and you are getting response times like 10 seconds, 15 seconds, 20 seconds. Then obviously it is a failed test, right? And then also when you find some application issues, like app crashing, okay, memory related errors, whatever it is, I'll just tell you these things later. But then all these should be considered, okay, to decide if it's a passed test or a failed test. Okay, in simple words, I've mentioned these 3 points, but we will discuss in detail in our upcoming sessions. So when your overall failed transactions are more than 2 or 3%, then, or like when the response times is very high, and then when you have some major application issues like application crashing, memory issues and all, then it is called as a failed test. Okay, that means you have to fix these and then run again. Okay, you have to take help of developers, you have to get these issues resolved, and then you have to run the load test again to get a successful test. Okay, any questions as of now? So did you guys understand like what is this load test? This is the first major type of test that we execute. Okay, then if it is successful, then only it's better to go for other types of test. That's what I suggest. Any questions? Let me check the chat window if I have any questions, or if you all are good. Okay, I'll take it as good.
Yeah, hi sir.
Yeah, tell me.
I have a question. This number of users, we will always get this number of users from the client, or we will get some other values, and then based on that we will drive.
Yes,
Can you
good
say that?
question. So instead of number of users also, where I mean, majority of the times you get number of users, but very rarely you might get something like uh, you know transactions per second, or hour, transactions per hour, or transactions per second, something like that, or requests per second, something like that. Okay, so like in sense like they might not give you the number of users. They will say that in 1 hour, uh, I should have like, 100 transactions per second. Like you run it for 1 hour, but per second I need at least 100 hits per second or something like that. Okay, 100 requests per second, something like that. Or they might ask you like 10,000 transactions per hour overall. So they can give you a different number, okay, which we will discuss in our upcoming sessions again. But at a very high level, majority of the times you get to know the number of users as well, and then you can get the combination of both. Okay.
Okay, sir. Yeah.
Yeah,
Thanks.
Kaushik, I have one more question. Kaushik.
yeah, tell me.
Uh, in my application, we will load flat files into the application. So some files may have only 100 transactions and some files may have millions. So in that case, how would you take this scenario?
No. I mean, see, file in file you will not have transactions, right? In file you will
When
have records, I guess.
yeah,
Like let
records.
yeah, some
Hmm.
records. So like see, like you can say like that. For example, if there is some UI, okay.
Hmm.
Now you have some upload button. You click on
Hmm.
upload
Yeah,
button. You
yeah,
upload a
that's what we
you
do.
upload
Yeah.
yeah. So let's say you upload one file.
Hmm.
Now, so your client will tell in irrespective of number of records that file contains. Okay, max it should take like not more than 10 to 20 seconds. Okay, so like the client might have give you some number depending
So
on the requirement. So
10 to 20
what
seconds for the whole
yeah,
file, or
for the whole file.
okay.
Okay, see, I mean, it all depends on what is the it all depends on what is the action that you are performing with each of those records inside that file. If you are performing various actions with the data
Hmm.
that is contained in the file, it might take little bit more time. But end of the
Yeah.
day, you have to
Hmm.
understand the requirement from client, what exactly the client is looking for, and what exactly the application team is letting us know. So
Okay.
let's say one file contains 10,000 records, other file contains 1 lakh records.
Hmm.
Obviously 10,000 records file will mostly, let's say, upload in 5 seconds. Okay, complete, it will
Hmm.
upload 1 lakh.
Process that file.
Yeah, it will process that file in like 5 seconds or 10 seconds. Maybe 1 lakh records would take like 15 to 20 seconds, we don't know, right? So
Hmm.
we have to get the requirement from client, like, okay, what is the max number that you can say that it should not exceed like 1 minute, okay, or 2 minutes or something like that. They will have some cutoff number. So you have to take that, and you should always test it with incremental number. See, let's say client is saying that uh, I have to up, I have a f- I, sh- I should have a file with 1 lakh records is the maximum. Now
Okay.
you should not directly test with 1 lakh records.
Okay.
You should test with 10,000, okay, 30,000, 50,000, 80,000, 1 lakh, like that. Slowly you have to increase the count. Okay, then only
Okay.
you will be able to know like how it is performing with different set of numbers. Okay,
Okay.
so considering that point, it will be easy from there on.
Okay. So it's something like we put 10 concurrent users, and first user will load a small file, then little bit bigger file, little bit bigger file, something like that.
And anything, see, anything is
Yeah.
possible. That is possible. But the thing is, only the client should tell us like
Yeah.
uh, what is the requirement and how we should execute it, and what is the pattern they want us to execute. So based
Okay.
on that pattern, we have to follow. We have to design our scenario basically.
Yeah.
Okay.
My application, they're not doing performance testing, and recently when they tried to load a file with million transactions, it
Mhm.
it ran for 6 hours and it crashed. So
Yeah, I mean, okay, I mean, what generally what we do is we don't we don't run with that much number in the very first
yeah.
attempt.
Okay. Yeah.
We start with some less number, and then we keep on increasing the number, so we will get to know, okay, where exactly it is crashing.
Okay.
Okay, so that will be a better approach, incremental approach, what we call.
Thank you
Okay.
so much.
Yeah. So so this is about the load test case, very very important, the basic test that we do. Okay, next one is stress test. Okay. uh, so stress test is in simple words. See, I'm not writing any textbook definition, guys, just because we don't need any textbook definitions. Even in interview also, they don't ask you any textbook definitions. Even if you explain in a generic simple terms, that should be sufficient. Okay, so if what is stress testing? Basically, testing an application with more number of users than the load test, or with more volumes, with more target volumes than the load test. So in simple words, I can write something like this: testing an application with more amount of load than the load test. Okay, or you can write more amount of users than the load test. Okay, so for example, like here in the load test you are testing with 500 users. Now anything more than that, like 600, 700, 800, 900, 1000, 1200, 1400, anything beyond the load test volume can be considered as a stress test. Okay, so here you are verifying how the application is responding with more number of users than the load test. Okay, I mean sometimes it can be the number of users, it keep on increasing until the application breaks also. Okay, so for example, you keep on increasing the application, when you keep on stressing the application, okay, at some point it will say, I can't handle this, that application breaks. So it can start anywhere, with a number which is more than the load test, and then it can end up anywhere, like, in terms of breaking the application also. Okay, so here I can simply write verifying how the application is responding more number of users, I can say, than the load test, right? So um, like for example, this stress test also you can run for 1 hour. Basically, if you want, you can run for 1 hour. Okay, and run for 1 hour. Now I'll give you one example, like because the name itself is self-explanatory, the term stress. I'll just give you one relevant example. I mean, generic example rather. Let's say there is a restaurant. Okay, there is a restaurant, and uh, there are 5 tables. Okay, 5 tables, so that the people, the customers can sit and have order food. Now there is one helper, okay, who will assist to take the orders from all those 5 tables and then deliver the food. Okay, obviously there is a owner also there. Now due to increase in demand, and there is a huge demand due to increase in number of customers, the owner of the restaurant decided to increase the number of tables from 5 to 7. Okay, now this helper who was assisting 5 tables, who was handling 5 tables, now he's able to handle 7 tables. Okay, now ordering the food, I mean accepting the orders and then delivering the food. Now again there was a little increase in terms of number of customers or demand. The owner decided to increase the number of tables from 7 to 9. Now the helper here is now handling 9 tables instead of 7. But the problem is, earlier for 7 tables, the helper used to, uh, accept the orders and deliver the food in, let's say, 20 minutes. Now, because of 9 tables, the helper is now able to, accept the orders and deliver the food in 40 minutes. Okay, that means the amount of time taken to accept the orders and deliver the food increased because the number of tables increased. Because number of tables increased. Okay, now let's say the owner decided to increase the number of tables from 9 to 11. Now the helper here, who was accepting the orders from 9 tables and able to deliver the food. Now when the owner decided to increase the tables from 9 to 11, now the helper said, no, I cannot handle all these 11 tables. It's done. Now I cannot do beyond 9. It's done. No, the helper left. That means the max the helper could handle is only 9 tables, that too with some performance degradation. Why? Because with 7 tables, uh, the helper could handle everything in 20 to 25 minutes. Now with 9 tables, the helper is managing. The helper is taking like 40 minutes, right? There is some performance degradation there. The response time, like kind of thing. So here also there was a limit. Beyond that, no one could do anything. Okay, similarly, from application point of view, even if you keep on increasing the users, okay, even if you keep on increasing the users, at some point of time the application will not be able to handle the load. Okay, at some point it will break. Now that you can call it as a breaking point also. Okay, so this stress test you can also run to find out the breaking point as well. Okay, and SLA is again given by client. It could be anything like 2 seconds or 3 seconds. Okay, I'm just taking an example of 3 seconds, but again it depends on the client. Whatever the client says, that should be fine. Okay, then what are we going to verify here? Here also we are going to verify the response times. Obviously the performance is important, right? The speed, even if in spite of increase in the number of users or the load, okay, the response time should not degrade, or the performance should not degrade. Okay, so that's what we are verifying here. So in simple terms, again, we are just verifying whether the application is able to handle more number of users, or application is facing some issues or crashing. We'll be verifying these things here. Any questions? So if this particular test is successful, then only, I mean, generally we go with this sort of tests. Otherwise, we generally don't run these tests directly. Okay. Did you guys understand what this test exactly is all about?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So thank you. So here, let me explain you the third, again, very important one. Okay, very, very important one. So this type of test is called endurance or soak or duration. I mean, the meaning is same, but different people call with different names in different projects. Okay, I mean, let's say in my previous project, I used to call it as a duration test. In the earlier project which I worked, we used to call it as a soak test, something like that. Okay, but anyways, the meaning is same. So this type of test is all about checking the stability of the application. Earlier I mentioned right here the performance testing is measured in terms of speed, stability, and scalability. So the stability is referred here for this type of test. So it's all about checking the stability of the application by running the test for longer duration. Okay, how do you verify the stability, by the way? So we just run for longer duration. Okay, so it's all about checking the stability of the application by running the test for longer duration. For example, like 3 hours, 5 hours, 8 hours, 1 day, 2 days, a kind of thing. Okay, see, generally we don't run 1 day, 2 days in every project. It's very, very rare, very, very rare. Mostly we prefer like 5 to 8 hours. Okay, so we prefer to run for 5 to 8 hours depending on the resources availability also. Okay, because let's say there's a huge team, we have only limited LG machines, we have only limited machines, then everyone has to test, right? So because of some limitation in terms of machines and infrastructure, we might even run for just 3 hours, because others also should test, right, by using the same machines. That's the reason. Okay, otherwise on an average you can, like, in most of the projects we run for 5 to 8 hours. Okay, then uh, here what is the important thing that you have to verify is how the application is behaving throughout the test. Like in the first 1 hour, how the application is responding; in the second 1 hour, how it is responding; in the third hour, how it is responding; in the fourth hour, how is it responding; in the final hour, how it is responding. So let's say uh, in first 1 hour, in first 1 hour, average on an average, I'm just telling on an average, response times, like let's say are like 2.5 seconds. So let's say we are running for 5 hours. In the first 1 hour, average on an average, we are getting 2.5 seconds. Obviously, you know, in the second hour, we expect the same response times, similar response times, like anywhere between 2 to 3. Okay? Anywhere between 2 to 3 is fine. Exactly, we need not get 2.5, but anywhere between 2 to 3 is fine. So, like it should be the same in third, fourth, and the final hour also. Okay, it's like in the first 1 hour we are getting on an average 2.5 seconds, and the second hour we are getting on an average 2 to 3 seconds, and then in the let's say in the fourth hour we are getting 7 seconds, in the in the last hour, in the final hour we are getting like 9 to 10 seconds. That means the performance kept on degrading every hour. There is no stability, right? So especially this type of test, we run for longer duration just to ensure that the application is stable enough. Okay, so the response time should be similar throughout the test. Okay, and especially in this type of test, of course we verify the response times. At the same time, we focus on something called memory leaks. Memory leaks, I mean, we also call like out of memory error. So most of the times there is a chance that there is something called memory leaks or out of memory errors, which we will discuss in detail in our upcoming sessions. But for time being, just understand that there is a high chance of getting these issues in endurance test. Okay, it doesn't mean that you don't get these issues in load test or stress test. You might get it, but the chances are very high in endurance test only. Okay, why? To understand that, we need to understand memory, heap memory, and all those things. We'll discuss that in detail in our upcoming sessions. Okay, just understand that there is something called memory leaks, an issue which is the most common issue, and we generally observe this mostly in the endurance type of tests. Okay, like one of you were saying, right, you generally run for 6 hours, like one of you said few minutes ago that they generally run for 6 hours. So there is every chance that you might get a memory leak issue or out of memory errors. Okay, when you run for longer duration. Okay, did you, I mean, I'm not sure like who asked that, who mentioned that 6 hours few minutes ago. Just asking out of curiosity, did you ever see this sort of errors in your test?
In the manual or functional testing, we usually do with 10,000 or something like that.
Hmm.
But that's a huge file with more
Yeah,
than million records.
correct, correct. So
So
did you
it
ever see
fails.
any memory related issues when?
Now we don't have any performance tool. We just starting to
Oh, okay.
implement.
Oh, okay,
So
okay.
we
Okay, then
took
it's good to
that
have
as
some
a
knowledge. Yeah, yep.
we took that scenario as a base point to start functional
Hmm, hmm,
performance
hmm.
testing.
Correct. So one more important point is, of course, SLA is obviously it will be the same. That means, see, the SLA is given as 3 seconds, so it should be the same throughout the test. Like even if you run for 5 hours, 8 hours, one day, doesn't matter. Okay? Now, one more important point is, with how many users you're gonna run this test. See, I said like 500 users here, and then little bit more here, like 600, 700, 800. But then here in endurance test, there are two things. One, we use same number of users, okay, similar to load test, okay, or we take 75% of the we take 75% of the users from the load test. So in point one, that means here also we are going to let's take 500 as the number, okay, for today in the load test. So in point one, we use the same number of users. That means endurance test also we are going to run with 500 users only. But in some projects, they go with 75% of the users. Okay, that means in low test you run 500, here you're gonna execute with 350. Okay, if you can ask me like which one I have to choose. So if it's an existing project, and if that particular in that particular project, if they are following some, either of these, like one or two, you can continue to follow the same. If you are the one who has to decide, okay, then I suggest you to go with this, the same number of users similar to load test. Okay, I don't see any reason to I don't see any major reason to decrease the number of users, especially in this test. I prefer to continue with the same number of users that I already use in load test. Okay, so if you are the one who has to decide, just continue with the same number. Any questions? All these things, all these different types of tests, how to configure it in the tool, okay, how to initiate the test, I'll tell you, okay, practically also. Any questions as of now? Did you guys understand the difference between these type of tests, like load test, stress test, endurance test and all? This is very, very important. Okay, now let's go with scalability test. I mean, the name itself is again self-explanatory here. If you see the first line, which where I mentioned performance testing is measured in terms of speed, stability, and scalability. So here the scalability refers to this particular type of test. Okay, so generally scalability test. Um, basically, in simple terms, it's all about checking the scalability of your application. How scalable is your application? Okay, the scalability. How scalable it is. Okay, now this type of test, uh, okay, this type of test, basically, one second. This type of test, the number of users we take it into count is by understanding the client's requirement. Okay, so especially with respect to scalability test, when client says something like this, hey, in the next 6 months, the total number of users are expected to increase by 50%, something like that. Okay, that means the client is giving you an assumption, okay, a prediction that in next 6 months, okay, the number of users might increase by 50%. Okay, let's say you run a load test with 500 users. Okay, now client says the users might increase by 50% in next 6 months. That means now itself you have to test with 750 users. That means 50% of 500 is 250, right? So 500 plus 250, total 750 users, you have to test it right away. Okay, so I'll tell you one example. So recently we all have seen the pandemic, right? I mean, it is still there, but then it was it was more earlier, like 2 3 years ago. So I was supporting one of the banking project. So one day what happened, I think in the month of May 2020, this happened in the month of May 2020. I'm just giving you an example. So one day client called us, okay, in the month of May 2020, and said, I was supporting one of the banking application then. So the client said, uh, due to pandemic, uh, more number of users are accessing the online application rather than going to banks. Okay, and the client even said that the number of users, okay, accessing the bank application, online bank application, might increase up to 400%. Okay, the generic statement given by client is due to pandemic, the number of people accessing the banking application is increasing day by day, and they could predict that in the next 3 months, the number of users accessing their banking application will rise up to 400%. Now, we already had a list of applications which we were already testing, doing the performance testing. Now, what client said is, for all those applications, okay, can you do a scalability test okay, considering the future growth of up to 400%. Now, let's say, let's say you already ran a load test. You already ran a load test for those applications. Let's say you already ran a load test with 500 users. You already ran a load test with 500 users. Now, because the client explicitly said the number of users might increase up to 400%. Sorry, 400%. Yeah. Now, can anyone tell what should I do next? Any guess? Now,
We will
this
increase the
this
users.
yeah, this is 500 users. I can basically call it as a 100% load test. See, because I mean this is the base number I have, right? So I can call it as a 100% load test. Now, client said the number of users accessing the bank application might increase up to 400%. Now, what I have to do next? If I have to test the application for 400%, what I have to do?
You have to increase the number of users to 2000 users.
Um, okay, so according to you, the 400% load test is nothing but 500 into 4. That is 2000 users. You want me to run this test, right?
Yeah.
But then the problem is if you run this test directly and if this test is a failed, that means the application did not support 2000 and it crashed. Now, will you be able to tell the client that it can support 1000 or 1500 at least?
No,
Will
I
you be
mean
able
we
to
have
tell?
to gradually increase, like
Yeah. So
let the
that's
start
the
with
reason.
500 and then
Yeah, that's the reason. First, you have to run this. If this is a successful test, then increase the double the load and then the run a 200% load test with let's say 1000 users. And if this is also successful, then run 300% load test and then run with 1500 users. And if this is also successful, then finally run this. Okay. So in our case, I mean, we were supporting like 12 to 14 applications at that time. So out of all those, some of the applications were able to withstand this amount of load. We didn't face any issue. Okay, all the some of the applications test all the load, test was successful with 2000 users, but some of them failed here itself. That means at least we were able to tell the client that these are the applications which are able to handle this much amount of load. These are the these are some XYZ number of applications are able to handle this much amount of load. Okay. Now, what did client do for the applications which are crashing here? The applications which were crashing here, what did client do immediately? Because of there was no time, right? No time to analyze because everything was happening at a rapid pace at that time because of pandemic. So the client immediately scaled up the infrastructure. Okay, I mean again I'm using the term scaled up. So so the client scaled up the infrastructure. That means the client increased the or servers capacity, servers count. It can be increase in servers count or it can be increase in servers capacity. That was the immediate solution that they have to give. Now, once they increase the servers count or servers capacity, I mean, and then when they let us know that they increase the infrastructure, okay, and when we retest it again, okay, those applications were also able to support these many number of users. Okay, so what I want to tell you is scalability test. When it comes to scalability test, it all depends on what your client requirement is. Okay, um, so there can be some ad hoc requirements also, especially with respect to scalability testing. There can be some ad hoc requirements also. Like one perfect example what I gave is because of pandemic, right? That is an ad hoc request. It was not at all planned, right? Suddenly the client came and asked us to do all this stuff. It took like 2 weeks for us to determine whether all these applications are able to withstand this much amount of load or not, because we were testing multiple applications, right? Like 13 or 14 applications we were testing. So we have to cover all these types of tests. We have to take care of test data, we have to take care of environments, we have to take care of scripts. Okay, everything we have to take care, and then we have to deliver the test, and then we have to make it successful. Okay, it takes a lot of effort. Hmm? Like it took like 2 to 3 weeks at that time. Very, very important learning for everyone. uh, then it is a volume test.
I have a question.
Yeah, tell me.
So, what is the usual duration of the scalability test? Is it like something that you keep on
One
running
hour
until
only.
the
It's
and
1 hour only.
but like let's say if it's a 2000 user test, then it takes a lot of time to wrap up the users and all.
No,
So
no. So that's the reason I told 1 hour steady state. Okay.
okay.
So here also I mentioned in the first test also I mentioned one point called steady state. So that means excluding ramp up or excluding the gradual incrementation of users and gradual decrease of the users, excluding that time, when all the users are up and running, then we have to count the 1 hour. Okay, so let's say you're running with 500 users. Now you started one by one, slowly one user after the other, slowly they will increase like this. At some point 500 users will will be up, and from here you have to run for 1 hour. So this time is called steady state. Okay, and then the after completion of 1 hour they will gradually decrease and end the test over here. Okay, so this is something called ramp up, this is something called ramp down. We'll discuss this later. Okay, so that's the reason I explicitly mentioned steady state, but then this term I thought of explaining in our upcoming sessions, because it is too early to discuss this term. Okay, but because you just asked this question, I'm telling you. So we run for 1 hour steady state. Okay, so hope I answered your question.
Yes.
Uh, Now next is okay. We have volume test and then failover. This failover we will discuss tomorrow, because the reason is we need to understand some terms like what is server, what is application server, what is web server, what is database server, what is protocol. Okay, so all these things we have to understand to uh, you know to understand this failover test. So tomorrow I will explain, okay, very clearly, like how to run this test. Very, very important. In the recent times, it is becoming more popular. So for that, to understand, we need to understand some other terminologies, which we'll cover tomorrow. So tomorrow it will be a servers, everything about servers, web server, application server, database server, and then what is failover test. Okay, today we are going to discuss volume test. See, volume test is same as load test, except that huge data will be inserted into database. Okay, insert into database, and then run the test. Okay, so what do you mean by this? I mean, I am only saying it is same as load test, but then but why are we calling it as volume test? On one side I'm saying that it is same as load test, but on the other side I'm calling it as volume test. Why? Because everything is similar to load test, except that for your application, whatever you are testing, you will insert more amount or huge amount of data into database and then run it again, which we call it as a volume test. For example, you run a load test. Okay? For example, you run a load test with, let's say, 500 users. But then for that application, whatever you are testing, the database contains 1 lakh records. The database contains 1 lakh records. Okay. See, what do you mean by database? Every application will have database, right? For example, you take college or any university. which information or what information will be stored in the college or university database, like students information, the amount they are paying, the course they are studying, okay, which branch, which department, okay, how much fees they are paying, which professor, who is the head of the department, okay, so much of information we have to maintain, right? Where that information will be stored in database. So let's say in for your load test you ran with some number of users, and at that point of time database contains 1 lakh records, assume. Now for volume test, for volume test you run with 500 users, okay, run with 500 users, okay, but with, let's say, huge amount of data or records, huge amount of records in db, like db means database, like 4 lakh records. That means when more number of records are there in the database, how your application is responding. Basically, this volume test is more like a database performance test. Okay. Like in sense, we verify, here we verify response times. In detail, we verify SQL queries performance also we can verify, like which query is taking how much time, what are the long running queries, what are the slow performing queries, like that you can monitor. I mean, for monitoring again we can use some apm tools like AppDynamics or Dynatrace, something like that. Okay, so hope you understood the difference. Only thing is we intentionally, it's not, it's not something happening as usual, it's intentional. Intentionally we are inserting huge amount of data in the database. Okay, now who will insert this data into database? Okay,
DBA.
take help of, yeah, take help of dba to insert huge number of records, because we cannot directly add number of records through UI. It we can add, but it will take a lot of time, like so many days it will take to insert lakhs of records. But for them, a simple stored procedure, okay, a simple insert statements can insert huge number of records within seconds or within few minutes. Okay, this is very rarely done, very very rare. If you ask me, sir, when did you execute this type of test, to be frank, I did not execute this type of test in last 3 4 years. Okay, when there was no requirement, basically that's the reason I'm saying it is very rare. I tested so many applications, but then there was no specific requirement for this. Okay, and final one is a spike test for today. Tomorrow we'll discuss failover testing. So spike test, I'll tell you in simple terms, theoretically now. It's all about um, testing your application with sudden increase in load and then sudden decrease in load. See, you start a test and suddenly you add 100 users. That means you're not giving server any breathing time. You're not giving a server any breathing time. You're suddenly increasing the number of users like 100, 200, like that. And then just run for like 1 minute or so or 2 minutes or so, and then suddenly decrease everything, like, drop it. That means you are giving a spike in terms of number of, in terms of the load that you are putting on the application. Okay, so when there is a sudden spike, a sudden increase or decrease in terms of load, how the application is withstanding, okay, is your application able to withstand a sudden increase or decrease in the load? That is what you are testing with respect to spike test. This is also very very rare. Okay, now this is becoming more popular nowadays, the failover test. Now if you ask me, in general, let's say client is saying that, hey, I don't know anything about performance testing, I mean, you only tell me like what type of test I have to run for my application. So what I suggest is, always remember this line: performance testing is measured in terms of speed, stability and scalability. So you always suggest to client to run a load test for speed, endurance test or soak test for stability, and then considering future growth, okay, run a scalability test as well. Okay, if client insists you to test any breaking point or something like that, then you go for stress test. Okay, so otherwise these three are enough, one, two, and three, because these are more relevant to the uh, you know the terms speed, stability, and scalability. Okay, so failover testing is something which we will discuss in detail tomorrow. Like it will take like 10-15 minutes to explain that, because I have to tell you how do we uh, execute that basically. Okay, with I mean we need some developer support to run this. I mean you cannot run on your own, because performance testers generally they don't have access to bring down the servers or something like that. You need to take the help of developers or some admin guy who has access on servers. Okay, so we'll discuss this in detail tomorrow. So tomorrow's topic will be like very important, like what is a server, what is a web server, what is application server, what is database server, what is protocol, okay, failover testing. Okay, so all these things we will cover tomorrow. Very important from interview point of view. So then the server architecture as well, like entire architecture basically. Entire architecture here only we'll cover like what is scale up, you know, scale up, scale out. These terms also we will discuss here only tomorrow. Okay, this is the agenda for tomorrow. So if you have any further questions related to today's topic, right? I'm available in the WhatsApp. You can ping me one to one, okay, so that I can call you and explain, or else, we can discuss first thing tomorrow morning as well. Okay, so it's 5 minutes past 9. So if you don't have any questions, we can connect tomorrow.
I just have one
Just
question.
yeah, please.
So you said something about speed, three types of tests. So just
Yep,
load test for speed and endurance test for stability and scalability test for scalability, right?
correct,
That's what you said. Okay. And stress testing is only if you want to find the breakpoint.
correct, correct.
All right. Thank you.
Yep. Okay. So let's meet again tomorrow, same time.